Yeah, we like to take this opportunity to welcome you to Conscious Study class. We are a philosophical and ideological class that do study the philosophy and ideology of Kwame Nkrumah, so-called consciousness, especially on such Thursday meetings. The intent of our classing today is to ensure that we actually organize a radical Pan-African virtual conference, because based on the Nkrumah's presentation and Nkrumah guidance on consciousness, the book and the philosophy that he wrote, he actually stated clearly to us that there are three types of Pan-Africans. Hope anybody can hear me. Confirm to me before I proceed.
I can hear you.
Thank you. So Nkrumah stated to us that there are three types of Pan-Africans. Of course, if you read the book Consciousness, at the introduction of Consciousness book, Nkrumah talks about the colonial students, and he categorizes them into three colonial students: that the conservative colonial students, the liberal colonial students, and the progressive or the radical colonial students. And this is where he refers himself to be. He says that I belong to the third category of students, who are called the progressive or radical Pan-Africans. So today we are actually trying to put in line so many topics of discussion. We had proposed to do around 21 topics of discussion for today's conference, but we actually managed to get 12 speakers or 13 speakers to speak on 13 topics of discussion. The first topic of discussion is the types of Pan-Africans, which of course we are trying to talk about. And then the second discussion will be on the puppet politician that will be led by Sister Linda from Zimbabwe, who is also a political party leader in Zimbabwe. Then we'll be talking about the African naming system and embracing African names that will be presented by Ba Atiku, who is a comrade from Sierra Leone. Then we'll be having African spirituality that is supposed to be presented by Fokwa Ambwe, who is in Ghana and Cameroon, but we will check if he's coming. Then we have the Pan-African Leadership Program that will be presented by Say Anye, who is also one of the founders on One Map Africa, also from Amazonia and also part of Ghana. Then we have another program that will be presented by Obet Masarure, who is the president of Local Workers Union in Zimbabwe, and it's particularly on the welfare of workers in Africa. So this is actually forming part of our discussion today, and this is part one and day one of our class discussions. So I want once again to actually welcome you all to Consciousness Study class, and actually to this conference called the Radical Pan-African Conference. And the key theme of this conference, as it has been stated in our poster, is total liberation, as you can see in our logo, total unification, and total development of Africa. And this actually is what Osegafio Dr. Kwame Nkrumah envisioned for Africa. When he said total liberation of Africa, he he went further to explain this in his book, Neo-Colonialism, the last stages of imperialism, that Africa must totally liberate itself from neo-colonialism. And this liberation takes into consideration both social liberation, political liberation, economical liberation, cultural liberation, and even technical and technology liberations. And he says, Nkrumah, in neo-colonialism, he says very well that the ways of neo-colonialisms are varied and subtle, and therefore we must continuously study, understand, and combat neo-colonialism in all means possible. So when Nkrumah talked of total liberation, he meant total liberation of Africa from colonial yokes. Africa is not actually totally liberated. And the liberation struggle for Africa started at the OAU immediately after the 1958 conference in Ghana, where Africa it's called the Freedom Conference that took place in 1958 in Ghana, that brought on board all Pan-African organizations, that then led to the freedom or so-called independence of many of the African states at the start of actually the 1963. So since then, Africa has been fighting for the liberation, and this has not actually been achieved, since many of African states, as all of us know very well, are still actually colonized in the so-called neo-colonialism, in social aspect, economical aspect, and political aspect. The next task and objective that Nkrumah talks about is the total unification of Africa. And when he said total unification of Africa, he meant the removal of balkanization borders in Africa to form one continental African government. And we can see Nkrumah says that the independence of Ghana is meaningless without the independence and the unification of other African states. And he said he is willing and ready to forego independence of Ghana for the bigger unification of Africa. Nkrumah extensively discussed this in his book, Africa Must Unite. So the unification of Africa has been attained, that African can have one continental unity government. Then Nkrumah went ahead to discuss the third objective called the development of Africa. And he called it the scientific social development of Africa. And in some other aspect, he says, we Africans are social in nature, and therefore we must embrace socialism or scientific socialism, which takes into consideration his philosophy, the so-called materialism or materialist philosophy and position. That is actually what the objective and the thinking of Kwame Nkrumah in regards to all Africa and to see an Africa that is totally liberated, totally united, and totally developed. So I will go straight actually to introduce the first part of the discussion, which was on the types of Pan-Africans. And based on the speaker who is a bit late and will not wait for him, I'll go straight to define the two or the three categories of Pan-Africans as we move to the next topic on the puppet leaders. And I know the speaker for the next topic is here with us. Sister Linda is already joining us. So we will move a bit to describe and expand on the categories of Pan-Africans. Now, Nkrumah says very well in the start of consciousness, the colonialism, some Africans were taken on the repositions of their parents, or either their fathers or their mothers, whether they were chiefs or head of the community. They got treated in a mission school in Ghana, then later on went to actually Lincoln University and other universities for pursuing his degrees and further degrees and masters and PhD. But Nkrumah says that in that aspect that the colonial students went out for study, they were exposed to various philosophies and ideology that then actually made them forget their original traditions and thinking, and therefore they adapted philosophies and ideology that make them either liberals or conservatives. But he says there's a third category of colonial students who actually went to pursue knowledge for the purpose of emancipation. And some do say that Nkrumah went for the prestige of knowledge. But to him, he says clearly the purpose of his education and even selecting the university he went to was purely to pursue knowledge for total liberation and emancipation of Africa. And therefore today, even as we exist in the current context, you ask yourself, are you a conservative Pan-African? Are you a liberal Pan-African? Or are you a progressive or a radical Pan-African? Some of you might have watched when Malema speaks. He says, we the progressive Pan-Africans. And he understands clearly that within the cadre of Pan-Africanism, there are those who are conservative or liberal. Those who are either thinking too much in the solipsism on their self and their families, and we see majority of them being in the political class, people who, when they get elected, they think about their family or the next person next to their family. And there are those who are liberal who don't care about actually taking consideration and preservations of what is all African spirituality, all African history and traditions, and therefore they want to be an open, globalized people. They talk of liberalism and liberalization of markets and whatever, and liberalization thinking. But the progressive Pan-Africans who think about radical ways to end neocolonialism, to end actually to fight for liberation, to fight for unification, and to fight for development of Africa. So these are three categories of Pan-Africans that actually, when one of the presenter will come and will give him another term, if time allow, you'll be able to expand further on this. But as a startup of this conference, it's very important to ask yourself, where do you stand in your Pan-African struggle? Do you see yourself as a conservative Pan-African, as a liberal Pan-African, or as a progressive Pan-African? And if you are a liberal or conservative Pan-African, you must know deep down that the struggle of Africa for emancipation and liberation actually requires radicality or progressive Pan-Africanism that think beyond a person to a community, to a nation, to a continent. So this is where we want to start with. And it will guide us as we move forward to see how do we become progressive Pan-Africans. Without wasting much time, of course, I see Sister Linda is in, and we will be moving in that order because actually the first presentation was supposed to end in the next 3 minutes. So unless you have any concern or any further questioning in regards to the Pan-Africanism or the nature of Pan-Africanism you are in, take note and write it down for any question, because at the end of the 4 presentations we'll be having, or 5, will allow for 45 to 30 minutes for question and answer, and then we arrive at a resolution or a solution on how do we create progressives or radical Pan-Africans. Without wasting my time, Sister Lida, I'll be requesting you to prepare and come in, where actually I'll give you 1 to 2 minutes to introduce yourself. Then the next few minutes to give us your thinking in regards to puppet politicians. Sister Linda, are you there?
Can I come in for a minute?
We are having 2 minutes to end this first session. So can they come in a minute? Mike, can you proceed?
Sorry, I didn't hear what you said.
I said,
Can I?
You're having 2 minutes to end this first session. Come in.
Oh, okay. Yeah, we have load shedding here, and I don't think that my computer is going to be able to last the distance. But I was very anxious to hear, and I couldn't hear very clearly, but I didn't know where you had positioned Julius Malema in those stratifications of Pan-Africanism. Where had you positioned him? I couldn't quite hear clearly.
Thank you for that question. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Just keep the mic a little away from you because it kind of distorts.
Okay, so you can hear me clearly?
Yes.
Julius Malema says, we progressive Pan-Africans, and if you have to judge whether he's progressive, we check on how his thinking in terms of the struggle for emancipation is. Is it narrowed within a country base, or does it think beyond a country to the people outside Africa and the whole African? And that brings the categorization of type of Pan-Africanism you are. The conservative Pan-African thinks about themselves or their family, like you see a president is appointing his family members to be a cabinet. But if you see a Pan-African that think beyond himself, his community, and fight for the entire generation of Africans or blacks or wherever they are, there's a progressive Pan-African. He's beyond self in terms of his argument and is actually push for the welfare of the people. Is that correct to you?
Well, I constantly have great deal of difficulty, and it's normally it's normally extremely hard to go into another country and pronounce on people and their speeches and stuff like that, because you don't have one doesn't have an intimate knowledge of that person. The one doesn't live with them day after day, and to the best of my ability, I would advise you to be cautious about Julius Malema.
I get you. He's not a member of our class, but it's of course a case study that we can study in terms of leadership, whether the wrongs and the rights he does, the same way we could study Nkrumah when he was there. So his study is not actually mean support, but it's a case study that you can have to analyze and check on weaknesses or any other thing we can do. But of course, we are open for a conversation of a study, because when you see a leader at that level, what you learn from him is how do we study him, and how do we point the weakness and the right things, and how do we come out on a personality, which is of course, as we say, very wide. It's both historical, personal, and actually is forward thinking.
Sure. Yes, I get that. I get that point exactly. I get the point that you're making. But yeah, just all I'm saying is be cautious about politicians because they speak with two mouths.
So thank you very much. Sister Linda, I want to talk about those politicians. So permit her to come in because it's 2 minutes late from her presentation. Can she come in and try to actually dissect the politicians? Sister Linda, it's like the conversation was pushed directly towards your point for today. So kindly come in, sister, and maybe introduce yourself. Sister Linda, can you hear me? Sister Linda, are you able to unmute yourself so that you can
all right, sorry about that. Good evening.
Good evening.
Yes, my apologies about that. We're also suffering from load shedding issues. So I was trying to put my torch on so that I could refer to my notes. I would have loved to do a video presentation, but I'm also trying to save the battery of my phone.
So,
my name is Linda Tsungirirai Masarira. I'm a Pan-Africanist at heart. I believe in African spirituality. I lead a political party called Labour Economists and African Democrats. I believe that all the solutions to the demise that Africa is facing is actually in the hands of Africans. And for a very long time, we've subcontracted our freedom to neo-colonialists because when most African states were fighting for liberation, they wanted their people to be free from fear and want. They wanted majority rule, and they wanted their people to benefit from their natural resources. But what we see today is outer bias. The real reason why most people who we salute today went to fight for the liberation of their own countries. And I always think that they must be turning in their graves because what they fought for and what we are seeing today are in very opposite directions. So I'm going to be speaking about puppet politics in Africa. And I think we have all seen puppet politics in Africa from the days that we started understanding what politics is about. And as we grew in our understanding of political activities, and as we also try to navigate to understand who we are, where we are coming from, and what it is that we need to do for us to save Africa from neocolonialism. It is not a secret that when the Berlin Conference happened and Africa was divided into so many states, there was a reason to take away our identity of African people and bring forth a new identity within African people, which many are still struggling to shake off. And it is all evident by how most African people feel that everything foreign is better, everything Western is better, and they will not live up to upbringing and restoring African traditional values. So from my perspective, a puppet politician is a person who indicates possession of power, but in reality is actually controlled by foreign individuals or forces. And we have seen this in a number of states across Africa, especially in Francophone countries. And I'm happy now that in most Francophone countries, they're now realizing that they've been living under puppetry governments and they're still trying to find themselves. But my biggest fear in most Francophone countries is, are they really leading the revolutions they purport to lead? Because what I've understood is most of the times when Africans get to a stage where they are trying to awaken and have a renaissance to say, this is who we are as African people, the colonizers, the imperialists, will also come back and try to control Africa by force. Because every time an African leader attempts to steer an independent course, even after experiencing threats of coercion and all that, intelligence
Comrade, we are losing you. We can't hear you clearly.
Of Western government.
Comrade, it's like we are losing you. Are you experiencing some challenges? I know you see the flood shedding.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hello.
What is that?
Can you confirm if you can hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Proceed.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry about that interruption. So I was basically trying to talk about how the West always intercepts whatever action the woke African want to do in their quest to continue controlling and ensuring that they own the mindset of whoever is in power in any African state. We have seen some cases. In the case of the late John Magufuli, may his soul rest in peace. He was an astute Pan-African leader who was clear about Pan-Africanism and did not want to be controlled by the West. But we saw that he died prematurely, and he's not the only leader that had to die because of advancing Pan-African interests. We also saw what happened to Muammar Gaddafi, because he was championing for a one Africa, one currency agenda. The West felt uncomfortable with it, and they decided to use their AFRICOM, which they've always used to manipulate Africans wherever they've set up their AFRICOM bases. In other cases, we've had African leaders who have failed to totally act independently and have always had to run to the West with whatever policy brief that they've got, and the policy briefs are actually determined by the West, which is a cause of concern for us as African people. We have failed to establish pure sovereignty. We have failed to defend our sovereignty as African people and to defend the independence that we celebrate almost every year, that my country is independent. But at the end of the day, are all African states truly independent? Are they acting independently? From my perspective, most African countries are not independent at all, because most African countries, whenever they do their budgets, they have to send them to the Bretton Woods institutions in the USA. And from my perspective, I view most African countries as puppet governments. Why are their budgets approved by the IMF? Why are their budgets approved by the World Bank? We have so many African billionaires, the Dangotes, the Strivers, Siwas, etc., etc. Why have they failed to converge and have their own purely African bank that can loan African countries money to develop, to progress, etc., etc.? We even have the African Union being funded by EU. We have regional economic communities being funded by EU, being funded by America. There is nothing that we can solidly say as African people, this is ours. I've asked this before and I'll ask it again. Who coined the name Africa? Is Africa our name? Do we identify with the name Africa? Because most of the names that we even still have in some other countries were actually left by the colonizers, and we've been people who are so proud enough to say to ourselves, we can divide ourselves along the partitions that were done at the Berlin Conference. So we have also seen imperialists resorting to economic warfare. I saw this happening in Zimbabwe when the late Robert Gabriel Mugabe, may his soul rest in peace, and ZANU-PF decided to initiate the land reform program. The Europeans came back and hit back with economic sanctions. And this was done to ensure that no other African country would try to take their land back. And we are still facing that problem across all African countries, where white people still own the majority of the land, which is supposed to be owned by African native people. We also have that problem where our mineral resources are being looted by the Europeans, by the Chinese, by the Russians, because we are not owning the means of production. Most puppet governments convey an image of sovereignty, yet in reality, they do not even have any sovereignty. They have to get consent from the foreign powers that are funding their operations, that are funding their political parties, and that is the reality of most ruling and opposition political parties across Africa. They do not fund themselves. They run to the east and west with begging bowls. And eventually, when they get power, they have to return the favor. We've got a problem across Africa where the Chinese are now taking over. And one day it won't be a shock. We will wake up the whole of Africa now belonging to China, because we do not know the deals that our politicians are doing behind closed doors with these people who are funding their political activities. So when we speak about puppet leaders and puppet governments, I should be candid and say most of our governments across Africa are actually puppet governments because they are reporting to some other foreign government. I've alluded to this before and said, multilateralism is a farce. It has never benefited Africa. But most of the times we're told that we are helping developing countries, we are donor partners, we are what? Why does Europe and other countries feel compelled to donate to Africa? Why are they not compelled to repatriate what they stole from Africa so that Africa can grow and restore her identity? It is a sad situation where Africa has got vast mineral resources, but her people are amongst the poorest across the world. Most puppet governments are protected by the armed forces of the foreign power that is actually giving them direction on what to do and how to go about it. And this is evident about the foreign military bases that we've got across many African countries. Before I started this presentation, I was trying to send Pigbin an image so that he could put it in of the foreign, the US military bases, the African bases that we've got across Africa. It is a sad scenario that our presidents, our governments will allow foreign military presence in their own countries so that they can be toppled at any moment they don't decide to honor the agreements that they made with those particular people. And most of the agreements that they make are usually very secret. No one knows about it. Unless if you dig deeper and try to understand what AFRICOM is all about, the French military bases we've got across Africa, the Russian military bases, that in itself is an indicator of puppetry, that you're being controlled by a foreign power. But these are conversations that we're not having clearly to say, how can Zimbabwe have a US military base here? We're in America. No, we're not. But fortunately enough, Zimbabwe has refused to have a US military base here. And the only military base I think we have in Southern Africa is now in Zambia. And there's another one in South Africa, if I'm not wrong. And Botswana closed the AFRICOM office that was there. So at the end of the day, when we're doing our advocacy work, we have to be clear about what we want as African people. We have to wear revolutionary jackets and say we can no longer have these foreign military bases in our African states, because I don't think the same countries would want an African country to go and have a military base in their own countries. As we also try to advance our Pan-African agenda, I think it is important for us to start having a revolutionary Pan-African agenda that will try to call for the fight against any form of neocolonialism and imperialism. It is a sad situation that we are slowly being colonized again, and the second scramble for Africa is happening slowly because our government, our people leading the governments are greedy, they are selfish. They'll do anything for money, for mentions, and foreign property, etc., etc. And those colonizers know the weaknesses of African leaders, and they continue to manipulate and abuse us. And as I wrap up my presentation, what hurts me the most is that Dubai was a desert less than 20 years ago. But now everyone is scrambling to go to Dubai because it is now a state-of-the-art place to be at. But can we say the same about most African countries? No. Why are we not motivated to make Africa an economic powerhouse? What is it that we can change, you and me, to make sure that Africa becomes a destination of choice? Africa becomes a place where people will come and get refined minerals, refined foodstuffs. I'm glad Ghana finally resolved to ensure that no cocoa will get out of Ghana without being processed. And I believe many other countries should follow suit to ensure that we get value addition and beneficiate all the mineral resources that we have, stop child labor in Africa, and ensure that anyone who wants mineral resources in Africa should actually pay us sufficient money and ensure that we develop our own countries. What is happening in Sudan, in DRC, is really heartbreaking, and a lot of people are not paying attention to the struggles that the ordinary man, the ordinary woman, the ordinary children are facing in those countries. And we are the people who are supposed to speak out against this, because puppetry government is now the order of the day. Puppetry politics is the order of the day across Africa. And before I say my goodbyes, we also need to interrogate on whether elections and this so-called democracy in courts works for Africa. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sister Linda, for that. That is indeed a wonderful presentation on the exposure, of course, of the puppet leadership and puppet governments in Africa, which will have actually to explore further and come up with resolutions towards the end of this session on what should be done. Because actually the theme and the call for this conference is what must be done. And it's good that you have exposed the puppetry in all angles possible. And I was thinking that Senator Kominchi was here, having served as a senator in a parliament. He could tell us how the puppetry goes on in governance, but it seems he's not here with us. He has dropped out. And when he comes in, probably we'll have to have that conversation in an open session. So, Sister, of course, you mentioned many things, including elections. You mentioned including military bases and control. You mentioned things that we need to have actually revolution, and so many other things you mentioned. But at least I will be looking forward as we move along on what must be done. I know you mentioned some, and if in case you might be leaving earlier before we read the session for what must be done, kindly don't forget to drop for us on our chat what do you think from your angle must be done in order for us to do away with the puppet leadership in Africa. So feel free to have some time at least to drop some text or some points you think that must be done, so that we can pick it up and move it forward to find a way on how do we get out of this. That will really be important for us, so that we can start to organize along that line. I see Brother Otise is here, who is actually going to connect the next pointings in regards to the same concept on the Pan-African Leadership Program. It has been very clear from the first point that we are having types of Pan-Africans. And I think, Brother Coco, I don't know if you are late a bit, but I don't know if I'll give you some few minutes because time has gone and you're only having 5 minutes to end this part. But I've mentioned part of the Pan-African or types of Pan-Africans. But I'll bring you in first before I try to say, so that this I can now connect the types of Pan-Africans, the puppet leadership that Sister Alina is exposing, on what now should be a package of Pan-African leadership to attain what you want. Brother Coco, can you come in and give us something? I know you had some emergency. Then Brother Say will come in to bring to us a concept of what type of Pan-African leadership is looking forward to, or is suggesting that can get us out of the mess we are in. Brother Coco, can you come in?
Good evening. Good
Good evening.
Let me try to put my video on. I hope it won't take. Do you hear me? Do you see me?
We do both, loud and clear.
Excellent, excellent. Is it okay for me to present slides? I'll try to get as brief as possible.
Might it take some longer time? Because we are trying to cover you up, maybe 10 to 15?
10 to 15 minutes. Yeah,
okay.
10 to 15 minutes is okay.
Okay, let me make you a call so that you can share. You just proceed.
Okay. So my part is to discuss the types of Pan-Africans.
Can you introduce yourself, Brother Coco?
Thank you. Thank you, brother. Gogo here. I'm calling from the UK, but I am originally from the Kingdom of Lesotho. That's why you see this lovely attire here. That's us. I come from the CSG group, which is a Consciousism study group, as well as the New Pan-African Agenda. I also am in the Farmers of Thought, as well as communalism and lots of other Pan-African groups, which can be really confusing. There's someone who else is someone else talking? But like Kyoko? Okay, I've muted him. So mine is simple, is to talk about the different categories of the Pan-Africans. And you might ask why.
You can share your screen.
Oh, okay, I can share my screen now. Fab, there we go. Tell me when you see my slides. Oh, here we go.
Yes, you can see your slide. You can continue.
Thank you very much. So the question is, what is Pan-Africanism in the first place? The answer is simple. Pan-Africanism is an ideology and is also a movement that encourages solidarity of Africans everywhere, Africa and worldwide. It is also embraced by the African Union as their own ideology. Then where does that start? You can argue for that starting in Africa, but I think the argument a lot is coming from the West, where they were. And the earliest forms of Pan-Africanism you can get where when the North American enslaved people were actually campaigning for their own freedom, saying we are freeborn people and we have never forfeited our natural liberty. Hakim Ali writes that in Pan-Africanism. But the Haitian Revolution has been instrumental in pushing Pan-Africanism, that unity and closeness of the African peoples wherever they are. And Haiti is not the first one to say. There was what was called Palmares African Kingdom in Brazil. And then there have been Maroons everywhere in the Caribbean. And there has been an African man, Thomas Peters, who was born in Sierra Leone, was enslaved, but then liberated and came back to Sierra Leone to show some of the Pan-Africans which we have had. But for today's discussion, I'm going to quote mostly from this man's work, Consciousism by Dr. Nkrumah. And he is saying that our society is not the old society we used to know, and things have changed now. So we have to take into account our Islamic and our Euro-Christian roots. But at the same time, we cannot abandon our original humanist principles. It's important. And that's how he names his philosophical view, which he terms conscientism. Then, why do we bother about Pan-Africans in the first place? The answer is simple. You have to keep your friends close, but you have to keep your enemies closer. You have to know who your friends are. If anyone is going to unite Africa, it will be highly likely someone with Pan-African roots, Pan-African tendencies, rather than someone who doesn't have that allegiance to the wider solidarity of the African people. Who cares? Who would want to unite African people if they didn't have that in them? And again, from Dr. Nkrumah, we say while societies have different social systems and those can coexist, the ideologies cannot exist. So the ideology of Pan-Africanism have to be at the root, because imperialism otherwise will come through the back door if we allow that. Hence, we do have to make sure Pan-Africanism exists to stop what imperialism does. Then talking about the categories. Talking about the categories of Pan-Africans, we will also quote again from Dr. Nkrumah. He noted three types, three categories: the liberals, the conservatives, and the progressives. With the liberals, he calls them here, they are looking more at universalism. They think everything is easy, we just have to go with the flow. And they actually rubbish philosophy such as Marxism. And by so doing, they are supported by their sponsors in a way. Those who are their patrons, this all started under colonialism. That is where we are. And we are here because we never really cut off from colonialism. And the liberal Pan-Africans were likely the root, one of the root sources of where we are right now, because they continued with the outlook of thinking everything is universal. So when we embody or embrace Christianity, or we embrace Islamic religion, or whatever else, we also always have to think, what about Africa? What about Africa? How does it affect the African continent or the African people? Then the next category of the colonial students were the conservatives. These ones, I will call them elites. They came to be who they are through their elitist status. And they never really worked hard to be where they are, but wanted to maintain their elitist status as it is. So again, do we really want to encourage such people to be ruling us? Do they know who we are or what we want? Then the third category of Pan-Africans, which Dr. Nkrumah belonged to, were what you call the progressive or radical thinkers. And these ones, they were animated by lively national consciousness already before they went to study. And what they were looking for was the knowledge to complement what they already knew in order to be able to emancipate Africa and their countries. So having said that, talking about what Dr. Nkrumah had observed, because that would have been during the colonialism, I took an opportunity to look at Pan-Africanism that existed outside the African continent. And from my observations, I know these two gentlemen who you see here in the slides were instrumental in what we have as Pan-Africanism. But most of the majority of our diasporans, they wanted to civilize Africa. They wanted to come to Africa to civilize Africa. And we need to think again. Do we really need to be civilized? Do we need to be civilized? It's a question that all Africans and all Pan-Africans have to answer themselves. Then the one thing which I've noticed lately of most of the interactions I've had with our friends from the diaspora is that they really don't understand how colonialism have played a part. There was slavery, which actually affected us both on the continent and both and those in their diaspora. But then colonialism came, and that affected us in Africa. I mean, harshly, I'll say. And our friends from the diaspora, our brothers and sisters from the diaspora have to know that. But those that I've interacted with, I'm not having anything to say to you again, Sister Ida, Sister. There are several others who I've seen who really are looking to learn and are learning a lot and understanding the complexities of colonialism. Then last slide, because I know my time is limited, is there has been something which I've seen on WhatsApp, which really, really attracted my mind, was, is it Pan-African or Pan-Africanist? This was by a guy called Vusi Moyo. I have not been able to trace him down on WhatsApp. If I do, I would want to have a discussion with him about this, because he says Pan-Africanism only encompasses that anyone believes that African people have a sameness as well as common interests and desires to have a united Africa. But with Pan-Africanists, they go further than that. They want they are committed to a free African. They want to remove the chains, and they want to fight to rid Africa of all forms of colonization and imperialism. But if you look at this again, it ties with what Dr. Nkrumah had observed of those three categories of colonial students, with others thinking universalism is enough to free Africa. It's not enough. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you. My time was limited for one emergency or another, but anyone who wants to have further discussions with me on this, I'm always available. That's the end of my presentation. I'll be guided by your questions.
Thank you very much, Brother Koko. Of course, we will be looking forward to what is your possible recommendations on what should be done and how, because we are discussing on what must be done. On your own thinking, probably you share with us on the charts, maybe 1 or 2 or 3 points you think that must be done in order for us to attain actually the so-called progressive or radical Pan-Africans. And I wanted to give a point to, because it's tied to what Sister Linda said on puppet leaders in Africa. And how do we get those puppet leaders? Are they the liberals or the conservatives that become puppets, but also progressives become puppets? And tied to your conversation in terms of Pan-Africanism, I'd like to actually give almost 5 minutes to Senator Morgan Kominchi from South Africa, from Zimbabwe, who happened to be a senator in a parliament, and to tell us from his perspectives, did the House look conservative? Did the House in Parliament, the Saturn, look liberal, or were there progressive leaders in that same assembly Saturn? And from his thinking, what actually brings this puppet leadership? Was he one of a puppet leader in the government, or what does he think, as someone who has sat in the parliament, what brings the puppets? Do we have also local puppets? Because you realize that even some local leaders are puppets of the main government in the state, for example, the presidential state. So what the president says is what you do. So even your member of parliament might be a puppet, your senator might be a puppet, as your president is also a puppet of the West. Senator Morgan, kindly get some 5 minutes to actually share with you as you are thinking in regards to those two topics. Senator? Kindly unmute yourself.
Hello. How are you?
You're fine, Senator. Thank you.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you loud and clear.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. I got just a small comment on Pan-Africanism. We are very far away from achieving what we want, simply because as we claim to be Africans, we have embraced the Western democracy. The governance of our continent, although we are governing it ourselves as blacks, but the system that we are using to govern Africa is foreign-based. We are not the originators of the system. The system is originated from Europe, managed by the Europeans. The Europeans set standards for us. So we work in Africa in order to achieve Western standards, European standards. That got nothing to do with our culture and our identity and our originality. Therefore, we are mismatched. That is not what we have in our own systems. That is what we don't have that kind of, we don't appreciate, we don't understand. It's foreign. It's not our language. It's not our, we're not used to that. The system that we are using in Africa to govern ourselves is a perfect system for the Europeans because they developed it. They understood where it came from. They understand how it's supposed to be modified. They understand how it's supposed to be applied within their communities. They understand how it's supposed to be used to develop their economies, to develop their politics. They understand how they'll be able to develop their health systems, education, everything else. The governance system was designed to achieve Western issues. Therefore, Africans, you can then ask your question. The question is that, are we really down? Are we not intellectually astute? But evidence on the ground has shown that whereas intellectual and as intelligent as anyone else on earth. But why is it Africa itself, for the last so many years, remained so poor? We have failed to convert our natural resources to the for our people to benefit out of it. We've failed to make Africa great. Yet Africa itself is the richest continent on earth. No other continent on earth is as rich as Africa. Everything that you want on earth for industrialization, for production, for economic prosperity is found in Africa. But all African countries are averagely poor, all of them. From Cape to Cairo, you cannot even point one African country that is rich. The question is why? It's because we're using the wrong systems to develop our own countries. So it has been always my recommendation that Africa needs to go to its basics and develop its own Afrocentric systems, Afrocentric governance systems, the systems that are natural with us, systems that have got our own culture. We need to develop Afrocentric economic systems, Afrocentric political systems, Afrocentric social systems, Afrocentric environmental systems. Everything must be Afrocentric. We used to live in Africa before the Western colonization. We used to live in Africa before the partition of Africa. How were we governing ourselves? We must go back to those basics and then modernize, develop those systems, the current technology, develop that system, the current people. We can do that, I do believe if we develop an Afrocentric governance system, which is neither East or West, the East or West will not be able to abuse us. When they come to Africa from the West, they will find Africans using their own governance system. When the East come to Africa, they will find us using our own system. That is what I believe. If we do that, Africa will become independent. Africa will enjoy the total freedom. Africa will be able to trade on equal basis with the Western world, Eastern, and whatever. At the moment, you are inferior. At the moment, you always want to work towards the standards of the Chinese, want to work towards the standards of the Russians, want to work towards the standards of the Europeans and Americans. Yet, no, we must set our own standards, Afrocentric standards, that should determine our own future. We can do it. Africans now have gone to school. We've got PhDs here, we've got professors, we've got doctors, we've got masters, we've got degrees, we've got everything, engineers, everyone. We can actually have our own African institution supervised by the African Union. Every country have its own institution, which is that we coordinate this development of our own governance system. It is my desire and my ambition that Africa must develop its own Afrocentric governance education system, which should be studied from primary to secondary, professors, PhDs and professors. We want people to acquire degrees and master's degrees in our Afrocentric governance. The way Europeans acquire degrees in their own Western democracy, the way the Chinese acquire degrees in their own Chinese-centric governance system, we must, as Africa, develop our own system, a system that will govern us. I do believe if we do that, we will have little interference from the Chinese, we'll have little interference from Russians, little interference from the Europe. The moment we do that, let me give you a typical example. When the Chinese got independent from the British, got independent from the British system. Hello?
Senator, you give you extra 2 minutes.
Hello?
Yes, I'm adding you extra 2 minutes, Senator. Proceed.
All right, okay. Let me give you a typical example of how the Chinese managed to fight the Western influence. The Chinese, you remember very well, the Mao was the chairman Mao was, they were fighting against the British system. When they got their independence, they developed the Chinese-centric governance system, which is being regarded as dictatorship by the Western world. But it's not dictatorship, it's how the Chinese developed their own system. The Chinese got their own governance system, which got nothing to do with the Western world. And look at how the Chinese economy is developed. Look at the independence of the Chinese. Look how they are living among the other world countries. So Africa must copy or do something quite unique and different from the Western world. Let's develop our own system. If we develop our own system, no Western power will be able to influence us. No Western leader will come in tamper with us. We will defend ourselves. We will develop economically. We will develop militarily. We will develop everyone. No another person will challenge Africa. Africa can be great. Africa's economy can be great. That I can assure you. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Senator, and we do appreciate your input. And of course, I do request Sister Linda and Brother Coco to actually put down some of what they think in the angle of their topics to be action points in our chat. Because after we finish with the brother, of course, brothers Tise will be coming on a Pan-African angle, we cannot be able to actually combine your point of action or what you think is the most way forward so that we can have some resolutions on them and adapt. Because we really need to start thinking on how we organize towards what should be the action point moving forward. I've seen two Hazard, Akik Ladue and Kyoko, but I will request that we have the last session. Of course, we take Brother Say to present as part of Pan-African Leadership Program. Then you open the floor for these discussions. Because I don't want us to at least start interjecting much with the speakers, but we have almost an hour that we'll have a conversation as the speakers also try to give us their input. But all we look forward is not only the questions, but also the solutions. So even as you come in later after we open after Brother Tise come in, try also to put in the chat what do you think is the best way forward in regards to the topics we're discussing. Because we want to make it an action-oriented thing that you can follow up and take up. So that I would really appreciate. So Brother Akik, if you allow me, let me get Brother Tise, who is supposed to present on the Pan-African Leadership Program, so that we can then come into this conversation. And Brother Tise, as you're coming in, you must understand from this angle that Brother Coco is providing to us categories of what is called the Pan-African leaders. Then Sister Linda has given us the aspect of the puppets leaders in Africa that are actually controlling Africa. And Brother Komichi is also bringing an aspect of what he thinks can help us get out. From your angle, Brother Tise, what do you think should be the best way forward in order to produce the leaders that can actually serve African interests? And probably, if in case we need to have such an African leadership program, and what is that program all about from your thinking? So welcome, Brother Tise. Can you introduce yourself and just move on with the topic? Thank you.
Thank you so much, moderator. Greetings to all of the comrades here present. Because of load shedding issues, please permit me to present without video in order to avoid me being cut off by the low internet connectivity. Thank you. Okay, thank you so much. Already a lot has been said, which I really appreciate from the other speakers. Dear comrades, I will present on the Pan-African Leadership Program that should be going on in Africa. So in order for me to really exhaust this topic, I will look at the very goal of Pan-Africanism in the first place. What was it all about? It was to it was for the unity of Africans. Pan-Africanism was for the elimination of enslavement, colonialism, and now neo-colonialism, the elimination of white supremacy and racism, the restoration of the dignity of Africans at home and abroad, with the sharing of the African philosophy of Ubuntu and cultural heritage. And now we have the another goal of reparations and repairs, which must be on the table. So we also have to examine who, when we want to look at Pan-African leaders, who are we talking about? We remember the works like the other speakers have made mention of W. Du Bois, Marcus Garvey, and other Kwame Nkrumah, Patrice Lumumba, and others. Of course, all these people stood for Africa and were able to achieve the flag liberation of Africa, the abolition of slavery, and they fought against racism and many other battles across Africa, the Caribbean, the Americans, and have contributed greatly to a bit of recognition of Africans across the globe. Now, what is our own duty at the moment? We have as a duty to create a sense of brotherhood amongst Africans, uniting various organizations that are in Africa, and we will not succeed. If we do not succeed, then we have nothing as legacy to keep for the next generation. Of course, there are some programs that must be, as far as the leadership of Africa is concerned, we must install in the minds of African leaders that their actions must be community-based and collective. And all these actions must be geared towards addressing the problems that are plaguing the Africans and humanity as a whole. If we must succeed, then we are looking at leaders with the following programs. The programs that will redefine and upgrade the value of Africans and African lives and the lives of the global humanity. We are looking at Africans, leaders that will reconstruct or reformulate the political system of Africa. We are looking at African leaders who are going to come on board and address the problems of conflict, wars, Africans killing Africans, and the problem of geopolitics and other international related relationships. We're looking at African leaders who are going to look into the problems of healthcare, electricity, industrialization, water supply, infrastructure, transportation, the miseducation of our children, which means that to me, Africa has to be able to burn all the African curriculum and come out with a new African curriculum that will meet the needs of the African people. We have to look at African financial also and African accommodations. You see, unless we African leaders are able to resolve these and many more of African problems, we have the issue of foreign militaries bases in our continent. Where did we come from with this kind of, status? Now we have also, what is the current situation of the current African leaders? What do they have as ideologies? They have problems to them. They have problems of terrorism, which to me, of course, those that differ with them in ideology and ideas of managing the state natural resources and that resources should be managed otherwise and not as dictated by the colonialists, are regarded as terrorists, and tagged for elimination. They also have a problem of insecurity. Of course, insecurity, why? Because they have put the military in place for their own security and not the security of the population. That is why the military protect their resources, those that they embezzle and amass from the natural resources that are supposed to be evenly distributed to every human being in the planet of in this African in the continent of Africa to themselves. And when these people want to meet the need of their own families and they go through robbery and other means, dubious means, they call them thieves, whereas they are the real thieves and looters of the people's resources. And so who are the real thieves here? You know, the problem of course, police brutality. I think that the security of Africa should be the priority of all Africans. If we can only look at within us and realize that our African philosophy of Ubuntu is there to resolve all our problems, because we won't, look, I am because we are, we won't have these problems. And the problems of redistribution of finance, of wealth. So I'll soon be rounding up. So if we have in our leadership program, we should look at political programs that leaders are servants, and embrace economic programs. Economically, we have to embrace the science of physical economy, where we use our natural resources into finished goods for the consumption of ourselves, our families, and our communities. And also, you know, culturally and socially, of course, we have to embrace our philosophy and bring a new relationship, you know, in the world. To end, I will also propose that the program should also take into consideration the 10 principles of new international security and development architecture, which is being proposed by the Schiller Institute, which says that the international security and development architecture must be a partnership of perfect sovereign states for peaceful coexistence as defined by the UN Charter. And also the second point is that the priority must be to alleviate poverty in every nation on the planet Earth, which is possible, you know, to work for a common good. And the third, they say that it is the expectation of the people living to prolong the full potential of health. So they must build modern health facilities in every locality in order to cater for health. Fourth, we say mankind is a very creative species, and therefore the creativity and innovation, the creative ability of man should be used to develop the means of, you know, meeting the needs of humanity and not to destroy humanity. And that they have to create an international system which is geared towards industrialization and building the standard of living of every individual on Earth. And that they have to focus on the new economic order, must be focused on creating the modern industries, that is in agriculture and in other sectors that will provide, you know, infrastructure also, build bridge that will link people together, especially in Africa. If we can communicate and trade amongst ourselves, I think that it is going to be a plus for all of us. And also the fight against geopolitics, to ending the division in the war and the conflict. You know, we have countries with nuclear weapons that are capable of destroying humanity. What we Africans must be able to look into how we coexist. Do we need to continue to producing weapons to kill each other as human beings, or we need to live to sustain and provide a sustainable livelihood for every human being? And also to overcome all the conflicts. They propose that we have to, you know, peace through development. If we have developmental projects that benefit the entire people, like Africans have projects that are beneficial to all Africans, I think that we will learn to work towards realizing the project and making the benefits for everybody, and the wars will be limited and fighting will be limited.
Brother Tise, before you
So
leave,
thank you so much. I just want to end to say that Africans must be willing to work towards realizing and finding solutions to African problems. Thank
Brother
you so much.
Tise, Brother Tise, can you hear me?
Yes, please.
Now, I really thank you for the presentations and the points you put. And I request that before you leave, if you might be leaving earlier, can you try to share the pointers that you think is action plan in the chat so that we can always come back and review them and see how we can build some concrete action moving forward out of that. I've seen Brother Cook has done that, and I know Sister Linda will do that. My question will be this one. There are so many leadership programs that our young people are exposed today for the West. There's either the scholarship to go study democracy in the West, and many of the young people are in this process of studying either in Germany or US sponsored programs for leadership. And probably these are the people who will come and contest for the next political positions in Africa. I know Nkrumah brought George Padmo, and Padmo was running apparently something like an institute that was helping to prepare independent leaders of Africa by then. I know there are some institutions that either coming in or universities or whatever. How do you envision that we must package this Pan-African leadership so that as the West is taking our young people to train them to act conservatively or liberal as them to continue their agenda, we also safeguard the generation? And whether do you think, I know you've touched on education, whether we can incorporate it in something like an education system so that even if we start training our first years or the newborn today, you know that in the next 20 years we can produce a conscious Africans who can actually think in regards to Africa. So how do you think that leadership can be packaged in your own thinking?
Thank you so much, comrade. In my own thinking, you know, the solutions to African problems can only be resolved by studying the problems that are affecting Africans in Africa, and not by being, you know how Africans were colonized. They brought a book. Those people that went to school, Africa has been brainwashed because we went to schools with Western curriculum that only teach us about Western culture, Western history. We've never had a history of our own that is written by us, that reflect our own philosophy, our own cultural values, and the like. So we must be able to look back within our own cultural circle and our own philosophy and find the leadership that fits and meet the needs of our people. Our people build the pyramids. How did they go about it? How did they come about that? We have everything, and yet we're going to look for what they're doing. They're trying to look for best, trying to take the best talent out of Africa so that they don't help to transform Africa to the state at which Africa is supposed to be. That is why if you're very smart a bit, they give you a scholarship and they take you out, you start working for them for a salary. You know, after that, they won't allow you to come back. They give you money and you come and start talking, you know, with your PhD or whatever program degree you have, you know, you are now working for them. You're not working for your own people, your own community. Thank you, comrade.
Thank you very much for that, because I really think that we need to have a way on how we harness this effort so that we can produce, I don't know if either we as Pan-Africans need to think on either a curriculum or a model of Pan-African leadership and package it into something like either a course or a content that can either be offered virtually or physically, so that we go through, like you see, they have short courses online for either business courses or whatever. Can we be able to come up with either something like a template of a document or a book or a course that even can take 1 month or 2 months or 3 months that can actually be subjected to some of the younger generation that are coming, that can equip them in terms of leadership, but a Pan-African and a progressive Pan-African-based leadership. And I think these are things we can do only if we can unite together and put them in context. Because as long as we are not ready to do this, then always offer their courses on their leadership and expose it to our young people. And our young people will be bragging around carrying their certificates in the name of leaders who are actually not leaders for Africa. And without, I really first of all need to know if Obed is with us. Obed Masaraure from Zimbabwe is with us. And if he is with us, let him text me direct so that I can know he's with us. But I now go back and pick it from where it was Akik was trying to raise an issue that I really want to give an opportunity for 5 minutes to raise what he was raising, and also request Brother Tise to write down the recommendations he has proposed on our chat. Brother Akik, are you around?
Oh, yes, thank you. Yeah, thank you, Amaran. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Can you proceed?
Yeah, thank you. It's just a straight question. It's not actually I want to lecture or something. Actually, there is issue. I would like to thank presenters, both of them, or all of you, was eloquent. It was very good presentation. Absolutely, the point was very good, straightforward, understandable, and I would like to thank all of you. So, the issue of a human being, first, you have to ask yourself who we are. We need to identify ourselves, who we are first. And then if we identify ourselves who we are, then we can move forward where we are going to, So if we are not, then we always have a time conference like this, I'm talking, and then we don't know how to cure the issue or cure the disease, where obviously Africa should be cured already from our father founders of African countries. We have Africa are different, if you can put it, different. We have a different nationalities in the African continent. And then if we don't identify those who are African, they are originally, we are not going to be developed. I'm sure I'm fully supported by Pan-African, what they're doing, and I'm fully supported by AU, African Union. But they have some shortage. Obviously, they will not, never, ever, if they don't change their policy. Take example, AU is just led by all the presidents of those countries, and some of them they're too old to what I call to be a country president. I'm not saying that too old cannot function. Too old to function in a way that he cannot want to lead the country for other people. I'm not saying the young people. Young people can be a corrupt also. They can have corruptions or something like that. But someone who can be fit enough to change the atmosphere of the countries. For example, create a job to the people, law and regulation, and all these kinds of things. Yeah. So it's too of West. So my question is straightforward, those people. What is the difference between Black nationalism and Pan-African? That's what I said before. If we don't identify ourselves who we are, then we will never, for myself, I can understand, some of my people can take it the other way. We will never go forward if we cannot identify ourselves. So that's why my question comes from there. What is the difference between a Black nationalism and Pan-African?
Thank you for that question. And I know anybody will be ready to answer that can come in. But having asked the question, who we are, before you even go to Black consciousness and other Pan-African or other nationalism,
that's also the part of the question there. If we don't identify ourselves who we are first, then the next question will come afterward. Yeah, you're right. Thank you very much.
Thank you for that. So his question is Black Pan-Africanism and Black nationalism. Is that what you ask?
Yes.
Black nationalism. Okay, thank you. I'm noting this, and in case you feel free to want to answer that question, just raise your hand. But I like also to give you space to actually think about it. And it's an open. Anybody can answer that question. It's not
absolutely. It's open. It's open. Yes.
Open question. So let me take the next question that was up. as we try to get anybody willing or ready to answer the question, just raise your hand. I'll give you the opportunity to do that. Kyoko's hand was up. Kyoko, what was your either input or question? The floor is yours.
Mine was an input. It wasn't a question.
Kindly proceed. 2 minutes or 3.
It was just, as I put in the chat, I think it's all well and good having specific systems or Afrocentric or otherwise set up within our countries, individual countries. But I think the root cause and what we're looking at in the current in the current time we live in is our leaders. A number of our leaders are greedy and corrupt. If we can't eliminate that aspect within ourselves, it's going to be difficult to set up any system that would work. If you go back in history, look at the leaders that have been eliminated, the Sankaras of Burkina Faso, Lumumba of Congo, Piogama Pinto of Kenya, Dedan Kimathi of Kenya. Those leaders were all assassinated by our own brothers and sisters for pittance. And it goes on to this day. You can see how Traore is struggling to hold on to power, getting interfered with because of his stance. And this is not being done by the West directly. It's being done by the greedy proxies of the West, our fellow brothers and sisters who don't see the bigger picture. So I think unless we eliminate this sort of greed and corruption amongst ourselves, it's going to be difficult for any system to work in the continent. Those are my 2 cents.
Thank you for that, raising that point. But allow me also to take you further on the same point. Greediness. Is it an African nature or is it a human nature? And where did it come from? How it happens that we have leaders, as you're saying, who might actually have claimed power, but as you categorize them as not being greedy. So if it means that it was possible to have leaders whom we can put and actually put forth as example of leaders who are selfless, and that's what we call the progressive leaders, who are not so liberal or conservative of their own thinking on their own self, but they're selfless and open up to the people. How do you think we can tackle that greediness in your aspect in terms of leadership and what to put forth as a nation? And not only on leadership. Let's go back to personal level. Are we really greedy as people before we go to the leaders? Are we having that art of what you call the Ubuntu? I am because you are, or I am because you are. Is it really here? Because I know capitalism has affected us a lot. But what would you propose that must be done in order for us actually to trace back our roots? Brother Kyoko?
Unfortunately, or fortunately for our continent such as ours, we give an example of Rwanda, where this is a so-called tyrant that is ruling the country. Kagame is ruling Rwanda with an iron fist, but with a program of development. You go to Rwanda today, East Africa, it is doing very well compared to the rest of the region. So in terms of governance in the African setting, I think you can't eliminate the greed, and I think despotic leadership, unfortunately, in my view, with a leader that has a passion such as Kagame to propel his nation is the only solution, China style. That's my view. Democracy, we are tribal by nature. I'm giving an example of many countries where our tribal affiliations are open to division and being exploited by the West. So you have factions that are favored by the West, and then they're sort of put up against other tribes. So I think in the leadership sense, in the African sense, Afrocentric style, I think the leadership from a sort of iron tough stance, I think would be the solution, unfortunately or fortunately.
Okay, thank you for that. But it's also open to others also here. So there are two questions that I'm confronted, and that's very important. But greediness, I don't think if it was really our value, because you see the setup of African setup and how we build ourselves, we're more of communal or social now. That's why we could have either a central base where nobody could go hungry in the society. Then we want to check where greediness came. Is it influenced by capitalism? To an extent today, politicians can be that rich and amass everything in a society where people are languishing in poverty. And how did that humanity get away from leadership? And that can be corrected, because I know majority of also ordinary citizens think that if I get opportunity today, I also want to be rich and forget about you people. And they say it even in government aspect that if I get to be elected, I'll also steal. So there's an aspect of people actually forgetting the umoja or the Utuism of collectiveness and start thinking of self and how can they advance their self-being at the present at the expense of other people. So it's a very important point that I would also want us to note. And anybody who might think he has a proposal or she has a proposal on how we can handle this must actually take into it. And that's why we also need to see how that can be done. Because if that is not done, then we are not a society. We are a man-eat-man society. We are like in the animals kingdom where it's always the fittest. And we are trying to eliminate each other's brother said. We are advancing weapons that can actually kill anybody as long as we can survive. And you don't care whether they die or not. Until when we know what's going on in African context on the wars, what's going on in Caribbean. So let's put that in mind and see out of this conversation, what do we think must be done? Actually, must be done. What do you think must be done? I don't know if Brother Coco, you'll be able, as you raise your hand, to also handle or tackle a bit the question Brother asked about Pan-Africanism and Black nationalism. Thank you very much, Brother Coco. Can you come in? And anybody who has any point to raise or question, we will be going back actually to reference our questions and our discussion based on the presentations that have been done. Some of the presenters have been late to come in, and therefore we will base our conversation on those presentations. Apart from this, of course, we also had a conversation to tackle African spirituality and African naming systems. The presenters have actually been late to come in, but along the conversation, if you think you have something that you can put forth or share with us in regards of what you are thinking in African embracing their naming system or African naming system, feel free to come in. And also, if you have something to do with what you think can be the best way on us to go back to African spirituality. Remember, Nkrumah says that a state must be secular and not embrace other religions, and religion is a big issue in Africa. So if you have something to talk on those two topics, also raise up your hand to give an opportunity to share something with us. We still have some time for that. Brother Coco, can you come in?
Thanks, brother. On the question of creed, you are right, Brother Kyoko. We have been programmed to think about basic needs. And those basic needs, they lead us into betraying one another. But we have a system which our ancestors used a long time ago that was called Ubuntu, Botu. Under Botu, I am because we are. What that means is we take care of each other. So our social system is our network, is our safety net. So using our safety net, we should be able to address some of those issues which were introduced by capitalism, individualism, and greed. But the evil one wants us divided, hence why Africa remains divided up until now. So what we have to do as Africans is to come together and heal, because we have been programmed to be afraid, to fear and think that the resources are depleting, or I have to be number one in everything. I have to get stuff, take resources away from my brothers and sisters before they have them. I have to have them. There is that element of hoarding, which we have to address as Africans. But before we do that, we need to heal. There has to be a collective healing. I have a comrade of mine who we talk about healing a lot. So we probably have to think about putting together a session on healing next time, which shows what has happened, what feared us that led us being, behaving the way we are behaving. Because as human beings, we are beings. As beings, we have a choice to behave at a higher level of consciousness. We are just not behaving at that level of consciousness. That's number one. Number two, under Ubuntu, we start with the people, and the people choose the leaders they want. So you find that in the countries where most of our leaders have been eliminated, there were issues with democracy. So democracy was there, it was competition. And trust me, after every election in Africa, tell me, are there not many people saying they were cheated? Is that those people who feel like they are cheated are a fertile soil for betrayal. Because if anyone goes and say, they have betrayed you, we can pay you this money, go ahead and remove them. That's where it happens. The system which we have inherited, or that has been forced upon us, is being used to kill us slowly, very slowly. So it's important we deal with the issue of governance, we deal with the issues of healing, and make sure that we unite. We are stronger united than apart. That is definite.
Brother Coco,
yeah.
I really, sorry for interjecting this. I really want to understand from where you're coming from. Do you think we are greedy because we have not healed? And if you have not healed, what have we not healed from that make us greedy? Because what brother is asking, and I see somebody, Karanja just put it in the chat, and I like the conversation going on in the chat, keep having the conversation. He says that we cannot legislate human characters, but we can legislate and make policies for each system that influence human behavior. So the question that comes in clearly is, if we are calling for healing, do you try to mean that we are greedy because we were either offended or we are hurt, that we need to heal so we stop being greedy? Because I think that, as it is said here, this is personal, and that's why when you are talking of categories of people or leaders or individuals, there are people who feel like they are so, like in a class, a rich class or whatever class, you see. And that's why even our politicians, you know very well, they want to even take money meant for drugs for somebody to die in the hospital, and they don't care. So do you think these who commit this atrocity to the next of men, stealing drug for an hospital, can claim that he has not healed from something, and that's why that's an excuse for his behavior? Can we just, in 1 or 2 minutes, highlight us on that so that you can move to the next hands that are up? Okay?
Exactly. So the trick here is national consciousness. We have to create that national consciousness. And for us to get that, it has to be a wider African consciousness. Right now, we don't have that. The South African right now, they feel they are South Africans and they end there. The Kenyans, they still feel they are Kenyans and they end there. All right?
So you're talking about Black consciousness.
Absolutely. Consciousness, African consciousness. We need to inculcate that in ourselves. We have been miseducated, and healing will be part of that, removing the poor education, the evil education we got. We got the education that's just to continue competing amongst ourselves. And if we can address that, we can go a long way. I know, as my brother Karanja has said, that it is about human phenomenon, but a human has higher consciousness, has different levels of consciousness. And right now we are operating at the lowest one, just to deal with our basic needs, just to continue being scared being scared of my brother, crossing the road when I see my black brother, because the media said my brother is dangerous. Is that we need to deal with lots of stuff which we have been educated on.
Okay, thank you. Even as I move to Tise, so you're trying to mean that Africans are feeling a sense that there's not enough for us, and therefore I want to make enough for myself. We have not reached that mentality of abundance for all of us, that there's abundance for all of us, and therefore other people are trying to think of their own self, thinking that it's not going to be enough for all of us. It's like when you see something, maybe a truck of rice, maybe house an accident somewhere. Everybody wants to pick all that can be for him. He doesn't know that there's extra. And I think that the mentality of abundance within the continent must now also come in. That people must know that Africans are not struggling for little resources. We have a lot in our mind. Anyway, let me get to what Tise is saying. Tise?
Thank you so much, Chair. I just want to continue from where my brother Kuku ended by saying that, you know, Africans are we need healing, to be very honest with you. Africans have been so brainwashed that they will fight their brothers who are trying to educate them on what are the virtues and the values that we must attach to each other, how we see each other. I'll take, for instance, an event, the All African People's Conference in 2019, or was it 2018, in Ghana, that I went there, and I presented on the topic called the spillovers of colonialism. And I used an example of the conflicts that are happening in Africa. And I said, we Africans, you know, are killing each other for the white and the colonialists to benefit. And I was attacked by my own African brothers for being controversial. I think Glenn Roy was there, and he had to come and stand with me. So that is to say how much brainwashed we've been, and we need healing. Honestly, by the time I became very conscious, I was so angered in my spirit to know that everything that I have learned in school was a miseducation. You know, from the fact that they are going to teach you that the Malthusian theory, that there will be a time where they have to reduce the population of the world through, you know, wars and biological weapons and all of that. And those things are actually happening today when we have the pandemics. I call them pandemics. I call others say pandemic. I call pandemics that are occurring, especially within African society, that are geared towards the killing and the reduction of the African population. And they also went ahead to publish a book that they call The Limits to Growth. Limits to growth mean that there is a time that they will have to control the population, and so they will be killing people. Those are the challenges. Those are some of the challenges that we as Black people, as African people, are facing with the colonialists and the West. We refuse to be racist. We refuse to be, we just need to assert ourselves, take control of our own.
I'm giving 1 more minute, please, so that you go to the
Yes, I'm saying that we need to assert ourselves, take control of ourselves, and stop, and within ourselves, build a mechanism to defend ourselves, beginning with our political system, our economic system. We have to embrace our economic system, know that we can only consume what we produce. We need to, in that way, we will use the ability, our God-given ability of creativity and innovation to find solutions to our problems, develop the things that we need to be used for our daily lives and live, to be practical, to be the practitioners of our African philosophy of Ubuntu. Thank you. Ubuntu in everything. Ubuntu finances, Ubuntu economics, Ubuntu political system, Ubuntu everything, and we will see that we will build a new community of African people that will be there for each other. Thank you so much, comrade.
Thank you so much, comrade. I will also still request that, please, if you can be able to post such of the recommendation you're putting on the chat, and Coco also, Brother Coco, on the healing, we can be able to put some key points on the chat so that we can pick it up, because actually, as I've said, the intention of the conference is what must be done. So really, what you think must be done along the topics we're discussing, if you can permit, I know the recording is done, but putting them on the chat can be an easier way for us to trace them so that we can start forming a strategy towards achieving that which must be done. Because actually, we must do it. And we now still, after this, we now have to start kicking the processes on how to do it. Welcome, Brother Sifu, and thank you for notifying us, of course, of a conference you're saying is coming up on 16 December. And I know on Saturday, Brother Sifu will be asked to discuss about reparation, restitution, and repatriation. And actually check on the chat on the content of that conference, and feel free to join that conference. The question was still asked, which you have not answered, on Black nationalism and Pan-Africans. So still have it in mind that you can answer that. We will be having the next 30 minutes for interaction, then the next 30 minutes, that's from the next 30 minutes after the 13 minutes in this session, we'll be discussing these actions that are proposed, the action points. We'll be discussing on how we actually align them and have a strategy for implementation. Because as we say, we have talked enough, of course, in other conference, but we must not stop talking until we start acting. So we continue to talk and lay strategy for actions. Brother Deking Wawuli, I'll be going to you, then I'll be moving to Victor, then Karanja. Can we have 2 minutes to share something? Only 2 minutes maximum, or 3 minutes. Deking Wawuli.
Hello, comrade. Greetings.
Greetings.
So I actually have, I don't know whether it's a suggestion or a contribution. Where we fail at is where we actually pick ourselves up from. We understand that Africa was interrupted brutally from these colonial people, invaders. Now, where do we actually pick ourselves from as African? Our identity, philosophy, and culture, and whatever, was interrupted brutally from these very people. So Africans have to now go back to that very point and pick themselves up again. That is all. Because if you take a look at the Chinese man went through the same thing, but not as brutal as ours. The Indian went through the same thing. The real Americans also went through the same thing, but not as brutal as ours. But today they've been able to pick themselves up and they are doing well. So what is the difference between we Africans and theirs? Ours, we spend so much long time under that very brutal system. However, it's up to us to say, okay, it's now time for us to go back to where we were interrupted from, which is our identity. Our spiritual identity is very, very key. Then it comes towards our tradition and culture. That is very key for our development as Africans. But until we tap into that, we are going nowhere. We are still going to be, walking around and always maintain the same ground every now and then. So we need to ask ourselves, what were we doing? Which path were we on before these people came and interrupted us? Okay, which good aspect of what they brought to us can we take, and which one should we reject? Then we take it from there and move on as people, as Africans. This, I think, should also inculcate into what we teach the young ones. The young ones must be taught about their identity, which is what should be in our curriculum currently. As we speak, that should be about it. If you come to Ghana here, it is very difficult for a Ghanaian to even identify his fellow African brothers. He's not conscious of his own continent, what is going on his own continent. And that is who's doing. Because of the education and the media. So programs must be put aside or put forth for all these things to be tackled so that we'll be able to live as brothers and sisters, then we can now pick ourselves up. As the brother was saying, that we need to heal. Once we finish healing, we have to find atonement. Then we now move on, not the fake atonement that was presented to us. So for me, this is what I have to say.
Thank you. Kindly also, I've noted it, but kindly have it also in the chat as a text. I know what you're saying is maybe what Dr. Christ talks of in the IC's papers, Keys to Colors, that how do we actually check on what they call the white supremacy system? Some don't believe in the, of course, white or whatever races, because of course we are one human race, but you check on the codings that were used by the whites to actually code us. And if there's a way, we find a way on how we can actually decode them. Because of course we have been coded in many aspects, from sex, politics, economics, education, and the rest of this. So the once you are able to decode ourselves from those codings, then you can free ourselves. Because some, of course, I think it's Chancellor Williams de Klerk who says, despite of an African man either being left free physically, he decided to still remain enslaved mentally. And therefore is a free man and enslaved brain. And that's why, of course, one of the early Rastafari's musicians talked about mental emancipation. So I think these are very good context that is coming up, and kindly feel free to put them on the chats. Let me go to Brother Victor. Brother Victor, you're welcome. Can you share your thoughts in 2 to 3 minutes?
Thank you so much, Brother Dean. So my contribution is to be short. So I'm just saying that one is that I think Africa, we have a lot of systematic challenges as far as everything is concerned. But the first thing that we must commit to understand, actually for us, the Pan-Africans, to get to one point of view, is that we must stop this concept of linear view of things. That one thing has to happen for the other thing to happen. That everything is connected in one vessel. And if you are to speak in changing Africa, there's nothing stopping at something to begin else. They have to be all connected. I think if we can forget past so much, but let's just take Africa from the point of independence. We've had a lot of challenges, and all these are not just on the aspect of they happened, like it's more of this systematic, but also let's see them as a bridge. That is my first point of view. Because the moment we are just going to be talking to respond and talking to with full of emotions, then we are going to forget the bridges onto how best Africa has been like progressing, but also has still challenges, but how to put all these things away. Because let me say one thing: if, for example, our transition in terms of economy has been more of less producer but more consumers, trajectory is that Africa today, we are rising in terms of our population, which means it is like a sword. It can cut us or like it can shape the world, but it's up to us to shape it. But shaping it means that we don't have to embrace ourselves with like more of self-centered thoughts, that those are what have to work for Africa to work. We have got diverse population with different cultures, and embracing it means that leveraging the potential of everyone, and even trying to bring as low as people we consider who are less less consciousness. Yeah, we always say that way. Yeah, we try to bring them up to speed in a way that conforms to their self-growth and realization. I want to say about the economy of Africa. Africa only has one potential, and I'm going to say this from this point, that back in the ancient Kemet, let me say Egypt, the Greeks took an economic model that is called social solidarity for economy. It's an economic model that is more or less Ubuntu, only that Ubuntu is more of social. But now social solidarity for economy is embraced on balancing the inequality and bringing equity at the point of it. So if we are going to be remodeling the economy of Africa, being that we have the population that is there, we are going to only be leveraging that. That's the because, for example, money is not the solution of the Africa. Like, is never the solution. It's true. It can be a solution for an organization or me or personally at my level, but for Africa, it is not that. So we have to leverage a model that has always been used by our ancestors back in the ancient Kemet to bring that this glory, because we can be sharing a lot of, but realize that we are just bringing all these diverse, we push them out there. Implementation is going to be like there's no implementation strategy. So let's just put all this in a way that we are able to have a call to action after this conference. At least we're able to put some work, because Pan-Africans, like, I don't know if for me, I've always seen myself just like in many of the platforms I've been, like, is more of an identity than an action. And this is something that we need to think beyond, because I know I can be very passionate about just talking, but if I'm not really going to understand Africa in the context of Africa, then still I'm going to miss out a lot of things. But we also have to appreciate let me say, the bad that has come to Africa, because they're the bridge that we have to pass through to create a new one, because we don't carry the bridge with us, but we go ahead there and create our own. Thank you.
Thank you, Victor. Before I leave you, I know what you do under what you call African Digital Inclusion Alliance. The question is, I know you're in the digital space, the technology and whatever. In terms of this, what you are calling the leadership, which was part of our program today, creating Pan-African leadership, whether the puppet politicians, and whether the types of Pan-Africanism, do you think there's a way we can use technology to actually advance this? As I was proposing, maybe something like an online course for Pan-African leadership that can be organized, like how either Google are organizing their Google certification courses, so that it can be offered for free for many people can have data. I know many of young people in Africa sometimes have data, but they use them for TikTok. If they can either use their data for something like some Pan-African leadership study, so it can help us bridge again the ability to get this content to many people. Do you think the digital aspect will play that? I know you said before that we also don't have digital sovereignty in terms of technology. I know that. And probably we need to think that. And I know you're working on that awareness. But also we will have a conversation, which we are envisioning, to see how do we actually embrace and empower and encourage African-based concepts as a digital aspect. So what do you think in line of that? Maybe in 2 minutes.
Okay, thank you so much. Yeah, so digital, let me say Africa is more, we've had positive trends in adopting technologies. Also, we've had a lot of challenges in maintaining our stand in our sovereignty in terms of having all these technologies coming. Because we realize that today, almost every sector of our economy and even our lifestyles and everything that we do, we work, we live, we talk, we communicate, is influenced by technology. And all these are part and parcel of our daily life, which means some of us today can never do anything without phone. You realize that is very important for us. But the step is that as a continent, redefining our technological sovereignty means that we have to embrace ourselves first. And embracing ourselves first means that we have to deploy a long-term solution plan. And that is what Africa Digital Inclusion Alliance has, that we are going to be looking forward to deploy a very long-term strategic plan of, because you are saying something like Google offering digital like certification courses. Yeah, they're offering that, but the only thing they do is to harvest your data and store it. Yet, yes, they're giving value, but the other side of it all, they need that for them so that we're able to create this, because data is the new oil of this century. As much as we come here, you speak about the oil, the petroleum, all that, the other oil that is coming up in 20, let me say it is already an oil, yeah, is the data, which means every country has to at least control its data, and a company that has more than data is the company that will thrive in the market. So realize that Africa today we control less than 2%. The whole continent is controlling less than 2% of data. So of its data. So realize that there is no data sovereignty anywhere in the continent, and all that is hindering every effort that we are doing, because today we will work, create a new, we say we will unite, but if your data, everything you are talking, everything you are doing, the continent is still like there's a restriction control. Even if we have got data centers built in Africa, but the restriction of access and control is still being monitored. So you realize that all these things are very vital, but even the policies our politicians are making in the parliament are still not up to standard, because you realize that I will give an example with Kenya. Once in a while you realize that the Kenya is saying that we're going to be doing Apora is going to be collecting people's data. All these is not that Google, Huawei does not have this data. The only issue is that if they are to buy from there, it is more expensive than if they are to collect. And also, they realize that when they collect, money has to still distribute in the country. So, like, they opt for that. So, realize that the issue is that we have to define our sovereignty from the aspect of all rounds. And just like Coco said, that developing a nation is first spiritual, and the spirituality aspect comes from even our leaders being more. Because let me say that all these things we do, like there's yes, yeah, okay.
Just proceed. I'll give you one extra minute.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, okay. Yeah, so I'm just finalizing that I'm saying that our sovereignty is our sovereignty when we embrace technology that is able to respect our human rights, also acknowledge us as the people are going. Because the more we continue having high population, the more we continue being dependent on the technology so much, the more we become consumers too much, the more power is going to be less centered in Africa, actually in terms of all these robotics are coming here, but we didn't also realize full industrialization as in our country. So we have a big task to put as Africa Digital Inclusion Alliance, and that is why we are still putting a lot of work to stand out there and make Africa the best of what we think it should be. But this still is a collective responsibility that everybody has to connect to and push it to their own standard viewpoints and even their efforts. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think we will have to discuss whether you will help us to, as we talk about Pan-African leadership program that TISA is talk about, we need to lie together and see how it can be put online. But before we take it online, I think we need to have something like a committee set up by the TISA that can now bring in mind many Africans who are around, who can come up with a curriculum, something like a content for Pan-African studies that can be universal, of course, across the continent, to help bring this up. And we must ensure that that content do not suffer elitism, because elitism is one of the challenges that Africa is suffering. And Nkrumah mentioned that, of course, in his book on elitism. But I think we can discuss that later, how we can now use the technology available to come up with the content, put it online for studies that people can access. These are part of action points that we need to take up. Let me go to Karanja, but I will also be interested to listen to what Mary is saying in regards to spirituality. I've seen Mary, if she's still with us, she has texted something in spirituality. I'll give her maybe 1 or 2 minutes to discuss that, because it was also part of our content, as now we move to the stage of harmonizing the way forward and pick up on this. This actually is the first day 1 of this conference. The day 2 of the conference will be composed of reparations, African common government for Africa, and other conversations will be happening on Saturday. But we need also to arrive with basic or mini way forward in this conference before we move to the next conference. So let me go to Karanja, and then Sister Mary, be prepared to share with us something to think in lines of spirituality. I've seen what you put in text. And also, I like to appreciate and recognize what Brother Eki, or somebody who asked about Pan-Africanism and Black nationalism. I've seen the text has been shared in our chat, but I'll ask later, what is our thinking? Do we incorporate both, or do we prefer one, or what was the context of that question, or the history or background of that question? So let me first of all go to Karanja. Karanja?
Thank you, host. My name is Karanja Gashusha. I'm Kenyan, and great conversation. Thank you for the opportunity. I'm going to try and be quick. Victor used a very important word, sovereignty, right? And we have to have food sovereignty, digital sovereignty, economic sovereignty, language sovereignty. It is a really, really important thing that we Africans neglect and ignore. And I think it goes even to your question, Mr. Host, when you asked about, for example, Google certifications, those are not our platforms. And Victor's response is very accurate, right? That when we are using those platforms, what we are doing is we are surrendering our data, we are surrendering our sovereignty. So it is extremely, extremely important, and we cannot ignore the seriousness of ownership of our own systems, economic systems, systems of government, systems of agriculture. Going back to our roots, back to what Brother De King said, completely agree with him on there. I had to jump in when I heard a question about greed and African leaders. African leaders do not come from Mars or Venus. They are African. They are our brothers, sisters, our cousins, our uncles. They come from our communities. Greed is not unique to Africa. Greed is a human thing and cannot be legislated. We pathologize African problems as if they're questions of morality and ethics, whereas in fact they're problems of systems, problems of colonialism and imperialism, which is something we were subjected to specifically to produce exactly the outcomes that it produces. I shared links to corruption in the Pentagon, the United States Pentagon, where they are unable to account for $3.8 trillion worth. $3.8 trillion. That is a figure that I cannot even convert into Kenyan shillings because I don't know what that figure is, times 100. 3.8 trillion times 100 is how much that is in Kenya shillings. But we don't talk about corruption in the United States. You can Google similar results for the United Kingdom, for France, for any Western country. But we do not treat corruption. We don't talk about Western corruption. They're in fact the most corrupt people. They introduced this corrupt capitalist system that we are under. The problems of Africa are systematic problems, primarily problems of capitalism and imperialism, and of systems that were created specifically to subject us, to subjugate us mentally as well as physically, and the end result is economic exploitation. Machiavelli, in The Prince, he details out a very brief blueprint for colonialism. And colonialism has 4 stages. The first one is you come in with your armies and administrators, which is what they did in 1895 when they divided, chopped us up and divided us amongst themselves. Then the second stage is you create an elite class that you then show them that they can be, if they can be just like you, if they can speak your languages just like you, and be just as brutal towards their brothers and sisters just like you, that they can have some privilege just like the colonizer. The third stage is what happened in 1956 in Ghana, in the 60s for the rest of us, and finally in 1994 in South Africa, where they hand over so-called political independence to us. And the fourth stage, which is where we are in now, we're in the fourth stage of colonialism, where they collect the spoils of their investment. It's economic colonialism. So all we are is at the fourth stage. We do not have independence. We are in the fourth stage of colonialism. That whole process, those 4 stages, what they serve to do is to create exactly the questions that we are asking today, is to create exactly the mentality, to create exactly this belief that somehow we are inferior, we are of inferior morals, we are of inferior abilities, we are of inferior ethics and cannot govern ourselves. Whereas in fact, all of these are systems that are created exactly to produce the pathologies that we see. So what we need to do is reverse that by going back to our roots. Before 1895, before these systems were imposed on us, we had systems, as the king said. We governed ourselves. We had African collectivist economics. We had economic systems of governance. The last time, those of us, any of us in Africa had democracy was when we had the councils of elders, which is how most of us were governed. Councils of elders are actually direct democracy, which is the most democratic system of governance that you can have. Direct democracy is the most democratic system. It's only practiced today in a couple of countries, I think Switzerland, Luxembourg, and I don't know which other country. So we have a blueprint that we can go back to. We have a blueprint for food sovereignty. We can go back to authentic African agriculture, our native seeds, our native breeds, our native systems and ways of farming that fed us for millennia. Systems of land division and land use that were not the capitalistic land ownership models that we have now adopted. And so I disagree that we cannot just begin at independence and then, we cannot ignore the past. We have to absolutely analyze and what is the word? Decode the mental colonialism, but that can only be done with an accurate analysis of of how we got here. And the way we got here is because the colonizer uses the social sciences. They do not ignore the social sciences. They have social scientists in every single policy-making department in their governments, and in particular in the intelligence services and in their foreign ministries, in their defense systems. So we have to have the same. When we are setting policy, we have to also emphasize social scientists, anthropologists, social psychologists, sociologists, psychologists, and even psychiatrists, to make sure that the policies that we are setting are going to influence people, are going to motivate people to pursue certain behaviors. And I believe that the solution for us Africans lies in us getting rid of the colonizer and colonial systems, including the colonial systems of governance. As an earlier presenter said, we were left with colonial systems, and those systems, the systems of governance that we have now, that we call democracy, the only thing they serve to do is to ensure the continued exploitation of our economies and our systems and our people by Western corporations, Western governments, Western continents and systems, and Eastern, by the way, as well today. They do not serve us. We belong to organizations such as the UN, the World Bank, the IMF, the WEF, WTO, all of which were formed at the height of colonialism when these same colonizers who created these organizations were brutally subjugating us and killing us. There's no way you can tell me that systems that they formed in the 1940s as they were brutalizing us could also have been created to serve us. They were not. They were created exactly to do exactly what they do today, which is to serve as the public relations arms of colonialism. They were not created for solutions for us. They are created for solutions for them. The IMF, the World Bank, the WTO, the WEF, they are all systems that are set up to ensure to prop up the US dollar by any means necessary, and the euro and whatever currencies that they have there. So the answer is yes, harnessing digital, but sovereign digital technologies, an African blockchain, African currency, a common African currency, common African defense, foreign policy and defense policy, common African languages. We really, really do have to decolonize absolutely everything, and we have to get rid of their systems. As long as we're using English, we're using colonial languages that cannot serve us, because once we're using their languages, we are operating at their plane, at the plane at which they have created and set for us. So it's not a minor thing. It is major, and we do need to decolonize absolutely everything. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thank you very much. I was actually looking forward to cut you short, but you had points that will help us. And I really appreciate whatever you've said. And my request is if you can be able to put on the chat some few thinking that you think this must be done or should be done. I know you've said them, but I'll request if you can actually just have some minutes to put then some points in our chat so that you can easily trace them within this recording. It can really help us to inform the next basis of our conversation. And I really concur with almost everything you've said in regards of us trying to play in their field and thinking that we can win or score a goal in their field. It's very hard. It's like playing on a home team. Sometimes you can win, yes, but playing against our home team in their own field is sometimes have everything else that can play against you or to your disadvantage. So thank you very much, comrade, and we can link up. I'm also equally in Kenya, and I know Victor is in Kenya. We can see how we can link up and set up these concepts and bring them in the best way forward. I was asking if Sister Mary or Mary was here, Mary X. I don't know if she's still here. She had mentioned something a bit in terms of spirituality, and I must also make you aware that you are almost moving to, we have already joined our last hour of our conversation, and therefore we will be moving in the next 15 minutes towards the action pointings and coming up with the resolution of this conference for today as we look forward to the conference of tomorrow. And welcome, Brother Kwame, of course, who is the chair of Conscience in Study Class. We appreciate your presence and you being with us here today. So permit me to check first of all the Mary before I come to say. I know Tisa is hard, but Mary, are you able to share something I saw you put in the chat in regards to spirituality or something like that? If you can, please, I'm just asking. If you are not able, we'll ask Tisa to
Yeah,
continue.
thank you. Yeah, thank you, comrade. I just wanted to add that as far as African spirituality is concerned, it is a very crucial aspect because this also encompasses the healing process that we all must undergo in order to regain our energy level. We also have the duty to embrace, a new system, because only a system can override another system. So as we plan to take over a system, we have to build the structure, and we start, which means that all African organizations, all Pan-African organizations must be ready to come together to start up a new process, just like the AU or the UNO was created. All African organizations must come together on a platform, on a round table, to pave the way for a new Africa going forward. That said, I want to encourage that we embrace the ongoing, works that are being done by other organizations. Like we have an organization working on African economy. You have the Umoja Generational Wealth that is going on. I think they have a conference in Jamaica in February. We all have to be there to see how that can contribute towards building a new economic system that we can rely on for a new Africa that we envisage. Also, there are ongoing processes to unite Africa, the African people, because without the unity of Africa, we would just be talking, each person at its own corner and each person doing its own thing and thinking that we are doing and achieving something, whereas we are not achieving anything. We just speak on conferences, no action, and we think that we're achieving. We are not achieving anything. We should be ready to take the action, which means that we must be ready. As we have had these discussions, we know where we are. We should be able to dirty ourselves in the mud and to bring us together to pave a way forward. Thank you, comrades.
Thank you very much. Of course, Brother Tise, what you have said is very important, because I remember Nkrumah talks in, of course, neo-colonialism, that balkanizations of states are meant for the benefit and the interest of the West. And also the same will apply to us. Our balkanizations of our various organizations at various fronts is only meant to serve the interests of the West. And the sooner we can find how we can work together and see how we can build that system, as you're saying, from the economic angle, from the educational angle, from the entertainment angle, from the legal angle, we put our heads together to start decoding their system and coding our system. it requires all minds to be on the deck, so that those who are actually experts in economics and those who are looking at economics of Africa, where even if there are 100 or 200 groups, must now sit together in a conference to come up with the African coding economic system. And those in the legal aspect must be the same, so that we can have a system that can then form up an African system that we can push forward to train and bring Africa through it. So I really appreciate what you're saying, and I will still say it even when you're here. The sooner we do this, the faster we can attain the liberation, the unification, and the development of Africa. The longer we take, the time the West and those who are dividing us will continue to divide us further. Of course, we know very well that the divide and rule was their tactic. And the moment you're still divided, they still rule. So thank you very much for that, brother Tise. I don't know if Sister Mary, whom I wanted to speak, is here. Sister Mary, I see you in. Are you able to share something? Because I really want to listen to the voices of the sisters also, since the brothers have also been trying much to share something. And you see, as Sankara said, women hold the other half. We only take the half, but we must bring the half in. Sister Mary?
Right. Did someone call me?
Yeah, I called Mary X. Kindly,
oh, Mary, yeah, that's me. Hello, everybody.
Hello.
Hi. Right, sorry, how can I help? I had to sort of leave my desk for an emergency call, yeah. Sorry.
I've seen you text something on the chat in regards to African spirituality, and I've seen you actively on the chat giving some of the opinions. What can you share out of this conversation?
Okay, what do you want to hear? What do you want to hear? Basically, I've said what I've said, because obviously I'm actively involved in Pan-Africanism. I've been for decades, most of my life. I travel, and whatever I do, right, in my professional life, I don't go as Marie. I go as an African woman, and I demand respect on that basis. And I tell people exactly who I am, and I am because we are. Yeah, I don't I don't give credence to my achievements because of me, right? I give it to my family, I give it to my community, which is not only local, it's international, it's global, etc. And I think until we as individuals can behave like that and start joining the dots, yeah, that movement is going to be very, very difficult. I don't necessarily categorize people in terms of different political systems, etc. What matters to me is their heart and their philosophy, and whether they're working towards the same common good that I'm working for. And there are two cases. My priority is the African race, right? I was born and brought up in the Caribbean, brought up in England. As I say, I've traveled internationally. Okay, so my priority is my people. Okay, and I think once my people, right, detach themselves and release themselves from all that stuff that's been done to us for centuries, we already are the greatest asset to humanity in terms of resources, our services to humanity. But once we can do what I've just said, right, people will be forced to acknowledge the gods and goddesses that we are. So that is my position. I've agreed with all the suggestions that been made, and I think I'm not going to be too long. I think what we need to do is to pull all the strands together, yeah, into one package that we can roll out, where there's something for everyone, right? And that we could act in unison, love, peace with each other, and know exactly why we're going in a particular direction, what our goals are, and what our destination is. Yeah. And it sounds like a tall order, but a lot of the, foundational work has already been done. We just need to trust the process. We just need to talk to each other more, listen to one another, regroup periodically, right? So that we can see how close we are to the horizon, so to speak. We're multinational, we're multi-dimensional beings, Africans. We're super intelligent, we're super strong, we're super beautiful, etc. We're super talented. Otherwise, we would not have been able to survive the horrors that we have gone through. And if I told you my own story as an African Caribbean living in this country, and the fact I'm here today talking to you, you'd say that I got my story from a horror movie. But I'm not going to go down there, okay? Personally, I know what we're capable of. And that's it.
Thank you very much, Sister Mary. And Omar, thank you very much. And that's the spirit, or the spirit of our people, and the spirit of one love to all of us. Sister Mayra, I am giving some sisters some space to speak again. Sister Mayra, and then what will you share out of this? Of course, you've been here, part of our conversation, what you are putting in place. What's your thinking on what do you think must be done? At the end of the day, our target out of this conference is what must be done. So what do you have to share, Sister Mayra?
Are you talking? Sorry, you still talking to me?
No, I'm moving to Sister Mayra. Your sister
Marie. Okay. All right. Thanks. I wondered. Thank you. Pleasure talking to everyone.
Thank you very much, Sister Marie. Thank you for your input.
Okay, Ashe.
Ashe, we are meeting on Saturday as we'll be discussing the second part of this summit on the
Okay, brilliant.
One continental government and one currency, one passport, and those other things is on Saturday. So
that's exciting. Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Sister Marie from, of course, Uganda, I think. And Mayra, are you able to share something, sister?
Sorry, Brother Pigeon, I can't, I'm not where I can speak at the moment, but I'll just listen. Thank you.
Thank you. We have Sister Teresa with us here. I think she's still here with us. Sister Teresa, then you have Sister Ozo Amaka Eze, then you have Sister Malin. Probably if you have 2 minutes each of us, then we round up, because we were supposed to be getting a round up points from around the next 10 to 15 minutes. So Sister Teresa, then Sister Ozo Eze, then Sister Mary.
Thank you, Brother Pigeon. It's great being here, and thank you for inviting me to speak. Should I speak now?
Kindly proceed, Sister.
Okay, yes, thank you. Yeah, it was very interesting to me to hear, the things that we've been speaking about in Emoja Generational Wealth repeated here. And I would really encourage everyone to get in touch with us, because we've been speaking on this for over 3 years on a Tuesday and on many, many different platforms. We've been on your platform, as you know, and also the GAC. But we have a fantastic opportunity to develop. And I love what the brother said about recognizing that the digital solution is just another consumer product. The summit that we have created in Jamaica is about the spiritual awakening, because you cannot protect something valuable unless you are aware as a human, using your full senses and faculty. So that's what the summit is going to be able to offer. So I really appreciate this moment to share with you, and I have put the link in, but we are talking about reversing the triangle and starting with the spiritual awakening. And when the brother asked about, are we African? Are we Pan-African? I think once we are awoken, those questions are then internally processed and digested, and we come to our full power, as the sister just said. So I really liked what you said, but I want to remind you that we've been talking on this, and we have got Bishop Mapunga coming and various other leaders who are going to be there to help us. So please, thank you very much for the 5 minutes you've given me. Thank you.
Thank you, Sister Teresa. Of course, as I've said that we are in a phase whereby we must now interconnect to decode ourselves from the systems. Of course, the systems that are ruling us. And I still actually believe and encourage that those who are looking at the economic angle must sit now and decode this. And we must have that conversation. How do we decode and have a system that economically make us liberated and not actually enslaved in their systems? And this is a whole sector that we must now start coming together in our positive forces and positive actions and build something out of it. Those in education, those in health, those in spirituality, those in whatever, let's build up, because it's a season whereby we must now start interconnecting. It's not a matter of competition, it's now interconnecting so that we can produce a solution for our people. So thank you very much, Sister Teresa, and whatever you're doing. And I know you've shared the link, and I encourage people also to be part of this. We must be a part of this global Black society and community so that we can move forward together as a people. I thank you very much again, Sister Teresa. I see Sister Eze. I know you might need to join, but you join late. I'll give you an opportunity also to say something, Sister Eze. And you're looking forward to another conference tomorrow on Saturday. So Sister Eze, then we'll be moving to Sister Marlin. Then now I will be trying to read some of the proposals that was shared in our text chat. I know they are many, but we'll have to go some few of them. Sister Eze?
Hello.
Hello, sister.
Yeah, I already said that I am in outdoor, but let me just say something, that what you are doing is good. Hello.
Hello.
Are you
Thank you
hearing
for
me?
that.
Are you
Thank you
hearing
for
me?
that. Yeah, thank you for that.
Yeah. I cannot speak much because of where I am now.
Okay, thank you very much. And you're welcome.
You're
Sister
welcome.
Marin,
You're welcome.
thank you very much, sister. Sister Marin? Another 1 or 2 minutes, Sister Marin.
Sorry, are you calling me?
Yes, I'm calling you, sister.
Sorry, what is it you wanted me to say?
If you have anything out of the conversation you've had that you would like to put, what do you suggest?
Well, I just heard the last part of it, and because I've not long got on, I think I came on about 5-10 minutes ago, and it sounded really interesting. I'm sorry that I missed the beginning, because as he said, we had everything in place before these European invaders came and dismantled everything. And that's the sort of message we've got to get across to our own people, because when they dismantled it, they made us believe we had nothing. Because I heard Marie, she said she went to school here, like myself. And when I grew up, I was told we had no history, not realizing our history went back thousands of years. I didn't even realize I was from Africa. Well, my ancestors was from Africa. I knew nothing about myself. You just thought, I don't know what you thought. As a child, I was quite confused. I was like, what is this all about? All I hear is things about European. I'm not hearing anything about Africa and Black people. And when I did, I just remember in geography, they just told me they had cocoa in Africa. It was very, very, unproductive, no history whatsoever. And I think a lot of people are lost, even in Africa. I think a lot of African has stayed connected because people have been able to hand things down through generation. But Caribbean, especially, and Black Americans, they had nothing that was handed down like proper history. No one spoke about slavery, which I'm not surprised. And you just heard about your family, but no history. And yeah, that's what I'd like to say. Thank you.
Thank you very much. As I've said, we are in the last part of our program, as you can see. We have actually been talking about the presenters have presented. 2 of them did not come in terms of spirituality and the workers' welfare. But of course, we've handled this and covered this. and it's an open floor. I'll still move forward, and I'll be calling upon some few people to put their thoughts forward. And because most of the what should be done actually have been shared in a text, it may take me time maybe or tomorrow to go through and populate all that has been suggested of what must be done. And as we wind up the second phase of the conference on Saturday, we might have almost 30 or 20 minutes to reading all the suggestions that have been actually proposed in this conference or the next conference, so that you can build action plan around them. Because I appreciate and I still request anybody here who think that there's something that must be done to put it on a chat text so that I can be able to actually get through them very fast and populate them tomorrow. Then on Saturday when we meet, you can be able to share them further. Thank you very much for that indeed. I'll call on some few people, of course, who have been also attentively listening here to share their thinking before Brother Kwame, of course, also come to help us in the last part of wrapping up. So we'll not be doing the way forward discussion today, but I'll be going through the chat to populate what you've suggested as a way forward. And I encourage everybody who has something that he thinks but must be done around the conversation for today, kindly put it in the chat so that I can easily access it. So let me get to Brother Elder Glenroy, if you are here, Elder. If you are able maybe to share just a minute or two on what you've been listening all along. I know you've been attentively here, and share with us what you still think around this conversation. Elder Glenroy?
Yes, greetings. I've been listening, but I'm in the midst of doing some paperwork. So I would rather continue listening. Greetings, everyone. Very interesting discussion. Many things I want to say, but I'm going to withhold that for a time being. Thanks very much, Pigeon.
Thank you very much for that. I'll also be calling upon Elder Sifwe was here. He left a bit. Sifwe was here. Anybody, we are having around 3 to 4 minutes to share around what we've shared today, a reflection of what was part of our conversation today, or anything you think that should be put forward as part of what must be done. Feel free to raise your hand so that I can easily call on you as we are coming towards the end of today's first conference. A lot, of course, have been shared, and I still encourage anybody with anything that you think must be done along African spirituality, along workers' welfare, which you have not discussed today, and I hope I can create space for it, along Pan-African leadership program, along puppet politicians and types of African, and also embracing African naming systems. If you have anything along those topics, can you put them on the chat also, what must be done along that? Because I know, of course, also we are carrying some of the names that actually we identify ourselves with them, but I don't know if they're ours. Because we have so many names that are either English names, and I know some are pushed on us during whatever they call baptism, or when they say that we are being saved now, as if we were lost or we were not saved. So when they saved us, they made us other new people according to their naming system. And despite of even us sharing the same names with them, George Floyd could still be George Floyd, despite of being George like them. So these are also issues that is facing us as a continent. And I think we need to see how we can have what must be done, or what do you think must be done along that line. So kind of feel free to text something in that line. Also in the spirituality we've been talking about, how do we trace our African spirituality and what do you think must be done? Do you have to have churches, African spirituality churches, or African spirituality shrines or whatever, so that we can actually reclaim back our original spirituality? So all this actually, if you don't have time because we are also rushing, help me text something on our chat that you can pick up as a resolution of this meeting and an action point that you can build up on. Anybody who has anything to share as we are trying to bring this to an end? We'll be moving to Brother Kwame later. Yes, Coco? Brother Coco?
Thanks, brother. Thank you for a very beautiful session. What I'd like to add now that is going towards the end is that the spiritualism which we are experiencing as ourselves, the children of Africa, is this happening here, is getting connected regardless of where we are physically at the moment. I found that since I started on this journey, I've met people who have enriched me. And I also hope I have done the same to others. I have really enjoyed today's session, and I hope we can continue meeting this way and helping one another and towards a united Africa. The most important thing which we should be working towards now is bringing them all together. We have too many. We have too many. I mean, we are too fragmented at the moment. So now that we are meeting like this, I hope we can go back and think about how we move together as a unit, because that is the key. It's actually the one thing which we need. We need to move together with a unity of purpose. But importantly, we need to decolonize. We need to remember who we are. We have our own stories. Sister Marlene, I really loved what you said there, because most of us have been through that. Even in Africa, trust me, the history we were taught, whatever we were taught, the religion, everything. I was watching a documentary of Kimpa Vita yesterday when Lillian Thuram was talking, and he said, I asked my son, I said, what do you think God looks like? And his son said, I think he has a white beard. And then he said, what color do you think he is? He said, he's white. So it's definitely like that for majority of us. We have been taught that God is only white. He has a white beard. And that's the picture we have. We have to come back to ourselves. And this is the spiritual connectedness that we need. We need to keep connected and move forward with a unity of purpose. No competition amongst ourselves. Let's all come together. Thank you, my brothers and sisters.
Thank you, Brother Coco. Thank you for that. I really appreciate that. And now we'll find a way on how we do the interconnections of what efforts you're putting together as a people from all aspects of life. And I think that's wonderful. I also appreciate people are still putting more on the chat on what they think must be done, so that we can actually categorize them, classify them, and see who do common thing and see how we can push it together. I'm not seeing any hand up, but I'd like also to say that, of course, Victor, I see Victor. Victor, yes? Victor? We can't hear you. You are unmuted, but you are not speaking. Can you unmute yourself and speak? Victor? We still can't hear you. So work on your microphone. Then you can come back. Engineer Emmanuel. Engineer Emmanuel, I think that's it. Engineer Emmanuel. Or ENGR Emmanuel. Can you hear me? Okay. Any hand up? I'm trying to check along the chats to see if there's anybody who want to speak, anything, so that we can give them the opportunity to speak before we bring this to an end. But basically, I do appreciate your contributions, the things you're putting in place. It's very important, because from this conversation, as you've said, we want to build up whatever is put forth as a way forward, to see how we can link them to who is who doing what, or how many people are doing what, so that they can start building up documents for action. Because we really need to have some documents that can be taken into consideration as a proposals and a position for all of us, so that we can move this conversation forward. We are in the face of action, and this action requires all of us. I really appreciate also, of course, what Brother Karanja has been putting forth in regards to his thinking, and any other people have been coming in. So before I bring this, I would like first of all to give Brother Kwame an opportunity to also share what he has. I know he came late, but I'll give him some minutes, of course, 5 to 10 minutes to share what he thinks. Then I'll be, of course, coming up with some wind-up as we come to an end of our session today. Brother Kwame, kindly come in as if you are able. If you're in a position to come in, please come in. I know you missed part of our conversation today. Christian Kwame Agoza.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Well, Brother Pigeon, since you've said it all that I was late, you don't think I'm able to say anything? So I will pass.
I don't think, but it's not that what I think is what you think. Basically, you've been here for around 30 minutes, and it's good that you share, also put this conference into context of what is the envisioning of this conference. Like what
I was, as you rightly said, I was late. I don't understand. Why did you give Brother Glenroy 1 or 2 minutes to speak when others have been speaking for more than 2-3 minutes? I was just wondering.
He couldn't even speak 1 minute.
Yeah, he would have if you had given him enough time. I know he's busy with his paperwork, but he's been here longer than I have been, and he's my elder. He's older than I am anyway. Therefore, an elder to me, and I'm sure if you had given him the time, he would have said more. But you gave him only 1 or 2 minutes, which is why he
No,
didn't
he
speak
said
much.
he didn't want to talk. That's what I heard Glenroy said.
Yeah, because he was
He
giving
said-
1 to 2 minutes.
Okay.
Anyway, be that as it may.
Kwame, stop trying to stir it up. I've explained to Pigeon. He knows that I'm here in Kenya, so he knows I'm busy with paperwork. So thank you very much for trying to drop me in it, but it wasn't around how long I had. I'm listening, but other than this, I don't want to engage in any long conversation. I'm writing some letters and various things. Thank you very much, God.
Yes,
exactly.
Brother Glenroy is always busy paperwork, but we need him to contribute when we meet like this. But anyway, be that as it may. Thank you, Brother Glenroy. Thank you, Brother Pigeon. Brother Pigeon, seriously, I came late, so I didn't catch the direction of everything that was said. But Brother Kuko was here from the beginning, and he said that he loved the session. So when Brother Kuko loves a session, I know it must have been very good. So I'll just echo what he said. Thank you.
Anybody who's feeling that they are locked out because I really want to bring the session to an end. It has been 3 hours. We started at around 6 p.m. GMT, and we are now almost heading to 9 p.m. It means some long hours. But in case anybody has any conversation or anything they want to share before I bring this to an end, and to remind you that it's not an end of our conference. We have 2 days conference. So this was the part 1, and we have the part 2 on Saturday that will go to other aspects we'll talk about. We'll be checking in an angle of continental military, continental currency, continental either passport, continental government. So we're moving to that level, and we'll also be having some conversation around that, which will be, of course, fundamental to what we have started today. Yes, Brother Coco and Sister Marin. Let's start with Brother Coco.
Quick one. I would like you to elaborate a bit for people who are new to the session about CSG, but also, if possible, would you like to allow Brother Karanja to come in again? I know he had the time earlier on, but he's doing a lot, and it would be nice also to join hands with whatever he's doing.
Okay, thank you. That one is well noted. Sister Marin. Sister Marlene?
Yes, and did I hear you correctly? You said you started at 6 o'clock.
Yeah, it was from 6 p.m.
And are we not doing the book now? Are we on to something else? I'm a bit lost. Are we now doing what we do on a Saturday, on Thursday?
Okay, thank you for that question. Of course, we've been having a 2-day conference around what we've been discussing all into a 2-day conference. So today and Saturday, we are holding this radical Pan-African conference where we have listed points we are discussing. So it's only for this week. Today, Thursday.
Oh, I see.
Next week, we'll go back to our reading.
Oh, no, but I didn't realize that. I didn't realize you had a conference on.
Okay, thank you for that.
Okay. Oh, well, it was interesting. I should have been there. Never mind. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you for letting me know.
Okay, thank you. Brother Karanja, are you here? On request of what Brother Coker said, permit me to request you at least to share in 2 or 3 minutes some of what you are trying to work on so that we see how we can interconnect here. Because this is a platform where we interconnect. We say the positive actions must come together now to defeat the negative actions. So Brother Karanja, are you here? And maybe if you are willing to share with us in a few minutes on what actually you are doing, we see how we can interconnect. Brother Karanja? Seems he's out. Karanja and Kare. I see you are also from the state of African diaspora. Karanja? Okay, if you're not able to come in, if you're able to mute yourself, well and good. If you're not able to unmute yourself, let me know. So if Karanja will not be coming in, let me proceed because we are having 8 to 9 minutes to the end of our class. And as usually, we always end with one parting song as we allow members to exit. But allow me to say that generals are trying to wrap up, if in case Karanja will come in well and good, is that we believe that we Africans need to have a conversation. Because we might be doing whatever we are doing in our different formalities or our different groupings, but we've not been having a cross-breeding conversation like what you are having here to try to bring various forces and various organizations working on various aspects together so that we can share what you're working and identify our forces of unity. And this is becoming one of course, our weaknesses sometimes, that we want to pursue individualistic ambition of how we grow individually without realizing that sometimes the interconnectedness of us coming together and trying to share something can make us reach where we want very fast, actually. But this has been lacking. So we think as a class, of course, we are on a philosophy and ideological class where we're trying to put into context what Nkrumah actually prescribed in terms of philosophy and ideology of decolonizing Africa, as I've said, with the mind of actually liberating Africa, unifying Africa and developing Africa. And we think that in this liberation struggle, if we start by that, there are so many organizations that are actually trying to work on liberating Africa, either financially, either politically, or either even those who are pushing for actually reparatory justice, restitution, and everything else. And it is incumbent that we must now start coming together to see how we can actually work together and synergize for the faster success of what you do. In terms of the unification of Africa, we've also realized that there's been less consciousness on actually Africans demanding for a united African government. People are still actually comfortable within their shells of I am a Ugandan, I am a Kenyan, I am a Tanzanian. And that's why you find that even you go to war to kill each other because you are of that border. So you find that the people in Congo might kill their brothers in Rwanda, or the brothers in Rwanda might kill the brothers in Congo, claiming that they are Congolese and we are Rwandans. Not forgetting that actually we are one Africans. So we are actually having, as it we said, a Saturday class, but this Saturday it will be a conference. A Saturday class has been meant for us to have an actual in-depth conversation and deliberate conversation on how do we attain a united African government. Because that is the ultimate goal of unity of Africans, a united African government. And how we discuss that. So this is also part of what you're coming in. But you're also discussing things of development. You see, there are people in IT, there are people who are thinking about development, cultural level, on social level, on all aspects. So how do we interconnect? And this is the conversation we are starting to have. How do we put together various organizations and talk to one another, talk to each other on how do we come up with a common ground on how we can move forward? Because I know all of us are actually thinking of Africa, but we cannot be competing on thinking of Africa. We can only be collaborating on thinking of Africa and helping and liberating Africa. So this is what we are trying to bring. And this is the conversation we're looking forward to, so that together we can build. Because you see, the revolution must be moved to the masses. And in order for the masses to join the revolution, they must be conscious. Now, how do we help them to be conscious? You see, how do we liberate them? We are, of course, financially still enslaved. people are still not having any funds. Our Africans are poor in the villages. They can't afford anything, despite of whatever they call the political freedom a bit. But where is our financial freedoms? Our country still look for loans in IMF, World Bank. We are still beggars. And even when they bring the debts or the loans, they spend it and squander it. Africans are suffering under heavy taxation to repay back. So these are conversations that we must have as a continent and actually come with a way forward. What must be done? And out of what must be done, do we build our strategy and how we bring forces to synergize so that we can achieve that what we have actually said that must be done. So that's where we're heading to. Where do we first of all identify what we agree together in different diversity that must be done? Then together let's sit down again and build that strategy towards doing it, and let's do it. And then we can actually adopt it as Africa. So this is where we are heading, and this is the conversation we're looking forward to engage, not only today, but for more times moving forward. We must actually go there, and we must have our space to go there. So I think this is the best way forward that we must actually think of this way. We must start talking. We must start having our UNGA. They call it the United Nations General Assembly. We must be having our African Assembly, not the General United Nations, our African Assembly, to start discussing these things. And it is us, the people, who must do this and push this forward. So I do appreciate your presence, all of you who have attended us today. And I will be requesting Brother Kwame to at least help us with one song as we will be moving out of this conversation today and to the next conversation. But I request you to come back again for next conversation on Saturday, and let's keep in touch. Let's be our brothers keepers. Let's embrace that Ubuntuism spirit, and let's be conscious enough and help other Africans to be conscious enough so that together we can actually liberate, develop, and unify our people from the 6th region to all the regions in Africa into one Africa. Thank you very much. My name is, of course, Comrade Pidgin Odimwengu from this colonial boundary called Kenya. And I'm, of course, the co-chair of Consciousness Study Group. And it was a pleasure to host you today. I'm looking forward to another great moments with you on Saturday. May you be blessed. Let our ancestors guide us and let our ancestors help us as we move forward. Thank you very much. Brother Kwame, back to you for an interview.
Yeah, thank you. I haven't got a music interlude ready, but I'd like just to echo all you've said and to say that Post-Racism Study Group is doing two things. First, it holds the weekly ideological and philosophical discussion on Thursdays from 7 to 9. And then it also holds a conversation about the unification of Africa. Those are our contribution to the struggle. And it is for this reason that we are holding this conference. The conference is part of our conversation, our contribution to the struggle. So I just wanted to echo that. Thank you very much, brother, for chairing and for leading the whole thing. Well done. You continue to make us proud. And on behalf of CSG, I would once again thank you all. We have a minute to go, and I am happy to play one Asian song. Yes.